Okay, right. Welcome everyone to M365 UK, Microsoft 365 UK user group. And so this is our fifth event since back in June. So, everybody's welcome. We've got about 65 plus attendees registered for this session. So to each and every one of you, thank you for being here and giving up your time to join us, our three speakers today. And so in a moment, we'll introduce them, but basically this is the agenda for today. So we have the first session from Lesley, Crook, and Stephen Wade, which is all about user adoption and change management. And what's interesting about this is particularly that there's following the Department for Works and Pensions, the UK government department. So very much looking forward to this session. And basically how they're doing it really. And then we'll take a break. So these are just the guidelines. So we're flexible around this. So about roughly 5 p.m. We'll here in the UK time, we'll take a 10-minute break. So can kind of take a coffee, stretch your legs and so forth. And then we'll reconvene around 5:10, and very much looking forward to Joanne from Canada, who's joining us live as well, to basically take her through her session, which is about protecting your teamwork in Microsoft 365. So two great sessions, and very much thankful to them for giving up their time as well to be here with us and really sharing their content journeys and learnings throughout this Microsoft 365 space. For those of you who are not aware or who don't know me and properly, I'm Chirag Patel. I live and work in UK, and I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant working with SharePoint for a number of years, and then obviously evolved into the Office 365 cloud space, working around various apps and services. And so by trade, I'm an IT pro, so I don't do any kind of development except maybe lightweight development with PowerShell or JSON scripting with SharePoint sites and all those things. But do feel free to connect with me, or if you would like to speak at M365 UK, drop me a line at techchirag.com, and I'll try and help you out or support you in doing that if you need any help around that. And generally just subscribe to M365 UK on Twitter, follow the updates as and when the slides and recordings become available, but also for the sessions that we have got coming up as well. So we got about 2 sessions planned for next month and the following month. So 18 November, we got the likes of Tony Paul and Ben Howard presenting their sessions on Powerapps and projects. And then we got the final session of the year around 16th of December from Patrick Guillemany and Gary Trinder. So we've kind of got all the interesting events coming up in the next couple of months. And there's the links over there. So meetup.com/M365UK is the URL to go and register your place for the this user group event. So we got about 250 members since June, so we're counting on that, and I'm really hoping that this is proving very useful to yourselves. So we'll post the links for the feedback. So if there's anything that you feel that can be improved, or maybe the sessions, or you want extra sessions or content, then do let us know on those links there. And then generally what happens here is that we basically record this event, so it will be available by Friday. Try and make that within 48 hours of today, and also the slides will be made available as well. And obviously, any questions from there on, then please use the Q&A today in the live event chat window there. Any question, feel free to ask, and we'll try and best to get answers to those questions. Okay, so let me introduce Lesley Smith, who's a 4-time MVP, does the most amount of work around the adoption areas, but obviously other areas of Microsoft 365. And Lesley works with Sanity, a consulting company, and specializing in a lot of works around Microsoft Teams. And in particular, I would also like to welcome Stephen Wade, who is our SME for Microsoft Teams at the Department for Works and Pensions and the UK department. So the pair have been working immensely over there, I believe, over the last 12-18 months. And it's a very interesting. I'm very, very much looking forward to it, because public sector is always very challenging, not just in terms of the workforce, but in just getting things done, because there's so much going on and all the changes. And so with the technology in the place, it's very much obviously a challenge itself to try and get that adoption. So we're looking forward to that. So I think with that, I'm kind of just going to hand over to Stephen, right, and also Lesley. And so with that, take it over.
So yes, the journey in DWP is probably been 11 to 12 months in the making so far. How we started off was I joined the department just under a year ago, where in fact the department as a whole was still in the process of deploying Skype for Business. So that in itself raised some adoption barriers in terms of how people were getting used to one platform that already had an end of life, and we were coming along trying to deploy Teams in all its glory to something that was totally alien to them. From that, over an 8-week period, we escalated that up to a pilot group of 10,000 in terms of like a private beta form. And with that, it was trying to work through the technical dependencies and limitations that the estate of our size in terms of over 100,000 users offers. So that's different skill sets, different devices, different working practices that have been established over many years within the public sector. We had to approach it as a cultural change approach rather than just it as a technology deployment, and that was key. The technology enables it, but it's very much the cultural acceptance and the cultural change that we had to focus on. Over that early period from like end of November last year onwards, we've escalated that now up to over 20,000 that we have now of active users. And that initial stage was focusing on developing our own internal content. So that started with our approach of getting as much material developed as possible, almost creating our own Learn Hub, we refer to it as, and many of you on the call will be familiar with the out-of-box learning pathways solution that Microsoft have available. We developed our own in-house version of that, covering links between SharePoint and OneDrive, basically to get that foundational level of what we were trying to deploy in terms of our adoption approach, and very much creating that community around it, which we'll touch upon shortly as well. So if we just move on to the next slide, please, Lesley. In terms of the adoption that we took, it's kind of been in various different iterations. In terms of how we started out was kind of key early adopters that we led from an owners pack, so developing a niche bit of training to get identified owners up to speed and kind of get their skill sets heightened above all other kind of generic users, so that they could start promoting what we wanted to achieve in terms of across all 100,000 users. This was using things like Microsoft Stream, which we've rebranded as DWP TV, just to get the content for the various different learning approaches out there as quick as we possibly could. And that over time has led to, we're currently delivering over 20 sessions for users via live events every week. And we've kind of gone past that 10,000 bracket now in terms of users that have actually attended our sessions with the help of Sanity, to increase our adoption rate. And across our set now, we're at that kind of 65% percentage mark in terms of users who are coming in day out and being active within the team space. One of the concepts that we're going to go to on in due course is, out of this, we've used this usage metrics in terms of who's attended training, who's active users, to create what we're referring to as our team's pioneers. So this concept is very similar to other kind of pieces of work that others may have done in terms of a champions community. Our pioneers community of users that we've targeted specifically from getting usage metrics from the Graph API, targeted them with bespoke module sessions and making them our pioneers in terms of going out across the rest of the department, waving the flag for Teams and all its capabilities and how powerful it can be used when used effectively. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of establishing the pioneers and getting that together. And the key output from that has been our pioneers hub. So this has just been a glorified SharePoint site collection that we have illustrated and uploaded all our artifacts in terms of scavenger hunts, instructions on how to change content in their email addresses. So Lesley, if you just go on to the next slide for me, please. All we've done with this is kind of outline the content in the SharePoint site, tab that in within the Teams area, and let them explore the content and use that content to host their own events. Very much put it on the emphasis of it's a tool that they're promoting. It's not something that IT or kind of forcing down people's throats. It's something that is there for everyone to collaborate on and improve their ways of working. At that point, I'll hand over to Lesley, who's going to touch upon how we've established this pioneers concept and the sessions that we're running with Sanity to encourage this kind of new change accepting culture.
Sorry, Lesley, you're just need to come off mute, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Good
Hi
start.
there. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Chirag. Yeah, so when, just to put this in context, when Chirag invited me to present, it was about, I think it was about 4 months ago to come along to the October session. I was supporting a conference called Comsverse. I'd actually lost my job because of the COVID pandemic, and I agreed to take part in the session and talk about my user adoption experience and insights. But since then I got picked up by Sanity. I've got a new job, so I've only been working with the DWP customers now for that length of time. Maybe it's just been 2 months, so an awful lot has happened in that time, and I brought along some kind of like new thinking around culture change into the program. So we've had an opportunity only in the last 2 weeks to road test these new workshops alongside the other Sanity kind of like select here, click sort of training, which is we rolled it now out round to now 12,000 people and around 200 sessions, and we'll be running those sessions right up until the end of the year. But we've added into the mix this new format, as Stephen's mentioned. We've called them pioneers. So to set the scene, it's always good to start the session with a little bit of a light-hearted joke. So I'm going to share with you a flavour of the content that we use at the session, not all of it, but some of you might have seen this. So there's a funny image circulating right now of a survey that asks who led the digital transformation of your company. Was it your CEO, your CTO, or was it COVID-19? And most people have circled in that survey COVID-19. So it's accelerating digital transformation at many companies. It's knocking through long-standing resistance and silos. And the CIO here has noted sometimes it takes a crisis to turn people's mindsets around. And this is very important, that word mindset. I'm going to go into that further in a second. But the crisis is always also setting the agenda and the priorities of where to focus digital transformation efforts, such as facilitating the needs of a mass remote workforce. And with this particular customer, this over 100,000 employees are now trying to work from home. So the workshop agenda that we've pulled together, it's kind of like in four sections. So we've got the principle, the vision for DWP using Teams, new habits and behaviours. We talk a little bit about thought leadership. I introduce them to the ad card change management model. The wonderful thing that Microsoft has Satya Nadella is really kind of embedded in Microsoft around growth mindset, and also introducing empathy, and which is none of this is an easy thing to do. So the resources go into the Pioneers Hub that Stephen mentioned, and we actually do run a whiteboard sticky note exercise. We run that twice within the session, and I'll give you an idea of the feedback that's come out of that. And then we invite them to go to another workshop if they wish, which is called the Go Beyond workshop, which follows this content workshop 4 days later, and I'll explain that how we work that with them, because we're not forcing it upon them to come back and actually be a pioneer. So the mere fact that they come along to this session, this is called the Discovery Workshop, the first one, and they're still kind of there as the people that are probably team owners, but they will only become true pioneers when they come back to the second workshop, which is Go Beyond. So it's defined by the pioneering vision is defined by DWP to identify the power users of Microsoft Teams, which, as Stephen has said, has been done by looking at the analytics within the functional areas who will be the advocates of Teams. And this purpose of this workshop is to take the power users on a journey of discovery to go beyond, motivate and inspire the adoptions of Teams in DWP with empathy, sorry, not sympathy. And we bring in this phrase of empathy and understanding the feeling of others experiencing a degree of anxiety due to new ways of working. So they will be coached on upskilling digital literacy, in focusing on Teams, but there's a massive program around digital literacy generally going on within DWP. We hope that they will get a good feeling of altruism for helping others, assist in the spreading the word, communicating key messages and delivering ad hoc training, nurturing new users, providing guidance and sharing best practice, expected to support colleagues who might be struggling with the change from email to Teams. They might need an understanding of the change journey. Well, they will need an understanding of the change journey, its timeline, milestones and future vision, and also be expected to collate feedback on how the change is being received, how teams are moving along the journey and capturing success stories. And we've got a kind of a format for them to do that. And we've already captured 8 success stories only in about the last 6 weeks for the Department of Works and Pensions, and ultimately leading the department to its audacious strategic goal to roll out Teams to over 100,000 employees by the end of this year. So I give them a flavour of the ADKAR model. Don't dwell on this too much, but it is it's where change occurs as a process, not as an event. It takes a long time to go through the ADKAR model, and it can be difficult and complex to understand, whilst with the added frustration of at home trying to work. So breaking down change into distinct elements helps us to understand the process of change and how to manage it from a personal and company point of view. The model is intended as a guide to move us through the change process from our current state to our future state, and that comes out in the format that we've guided them to use for their success stories. We are giving potential pioneers access to this framework to help them pinpoint where they are in the Teams change process, so they might coach colleagues based on their unique journey and their pain points and challenges. So here you can see the first 3 steps. We have the enablement zone, so we've got awareness, desire and knowledge, and underneath we've added the Teams Pioneers Discovery Workshop. So by the time they get to coming along to this session, they would have already gone through awareness and desire. They would already have gone through quite a few Sanity training sessions, and they would have upskilled, and they've now got an appetite to know more. If they come back to the Go Beyond workshop, this is where their ability would be able to monitor their performance with their success stories or their personal change journeys, and look where we can give them more kind of like white glove support and really focus on how we can really support them to support their team. So it's ultimately, I like to think about it, dropping a pebble into water, you know, kind of like what's in it for them, what do they need, but ultimately how can they go on to lead their team, and ultimately, you know, what's best for that this public sector, this huge department. But it's reinforcing change over time, you know, with some rewards and recognition, which I'll touch upon at the end of the session, and also reinforcing the change with those success stories. So another model that has gone down pretty well actually since I've been sharing it with them. Some people have already know this model, and many of you might have already seen this. So this is the change curve of resistance, and it's based on a model originally developed in the 1960s by a lady called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to explain the grieving process. And since then it has been widely used as a method of helping people understand their reactions to a significant change or upheaval. Need different teeth in today. This model might be applied to any dramatic life-changing situation, and by the 1980s this model was a firm fixture in change management. The curve and its emotions can be used to predict how a performance is likely to be affected by the announcement and subsequent implementation of a significant change. So examples that we can give around this, you know, in our day-to-day life is the fact that we have being asked to wear face masks, and it's the shock and the disbelief of this, but equally the fact that we're getting to the point where we have to understand, and it's going to have to be sustainable for months going forward. There's also the example of the shock when we lose our job, and this is paramount of what the pandemic has caused. And I'll touch upon a new program that Microsoft campaign that Microsoft just announced yesterday at the Envision conference, where this really comes into its own. But the pioneer's little symbol on here, the three little people, if COVID hadn't have hit and they were trying to commission and roll out teams within a public sector department like DWP, they would have very much been way up the disbelief phase. We couldn't get them out of using email, you know, real hard negotiation. But because so many of them are now working from home, where they are really much at the explore stage, and the fact that we've already had 12,000 people attend training sessions is, you know, can really tell that the culture of kind of like an old dinosaur government department is really having to shift now. I also introduced them to talk about fixed mindset and growth mindset, which is, as I said, been really instilled in the Microsoft psyche of their employees, and also in the MVP community, and I hope now introducing it further afield. So having a fixed mindset means you tend to give up challenging tasks easily or avoid things where you failed before. You believe that being good at a particular activity is a fixed state and something you can't control. You're either good at it or you're not. But having a growth mindset means you might bounce back quickly from failure. It also makes you more likely to explore and discover and experiment, and how you can get better at doing something. So you believe that you can improve your abilities by practicing or trying a different way to achieve your goal with an inquisitive mind. And I love where this has come from, this was actually developed for nursery school children, and it's this really important little word of trying. You know, it's getting them to try to tie their own shoelaces, you know, to try and button up their own jumpers and button up their own, zip up their own clothing and everything like that. It's that trying. Otherwise, if we didn't try, you would never learn anything. But we have to realise that, you know, instilling this growth mindset for the rest of our lives will constantly drive us forward. So one more model that I've had this kind of like spinning around me for about the last 4 years, and comes out of my adoption work with Yammer, and I've presented on this many times. There was actually 6 little boxes here, and 6 little kind of like fictitious roles or personas, but I've adapted it since I've been working with DWP, and we've now got a Microsoft Teams version, but it's it also, the original idea of this came to me from a model that was developed by Edward de Bono called the 6 Thinking Hats from the 1970s, and that was his parallel thinking colour top hat. So that's where I kind of stole the idea from, and you can look that up if you want to on how that model works. But we pondered how we might make the AMA and adoption and Teams adoption a bit more fun, and based on experience created the Teams pioneers. But please do not think of these as individuals working on their own. They are passionate people who pivot under fictitious roles within seconds, switching hats, enabling collaboration and improving productivity. So I like to think we've got 5 of these fictitious roles around the use of Teams. So you've got astronauts who go where no employees have gone before. They break down silos. And I bring in this phrase that some of you who know me well is about working out loud. And it's sharing your work with a view that others might find it helpful and others might help you improve your work. And that's actually a book by a good friend of some of ours, John Stepper. And they love Teams. They love everything about Teams. Then we have our thought leaders. They encourage less email, more Teams. They like posts. They delegate to subject matter experts. They love Teams, OneNote and Whiteboard. Then we've got our entertainers. They have fun with a purpose. They're disruptors with who put out big announcements and they praise liberally. They encourage remote working in virtual events, and they perhaps carry out fundraising for the company and community efforts. They're using emojis and GIFs, and they love Teams and the fun stuff. Then we've got our scientists, who are visionaries with new ideas, solving problems and innovating. They're monitoring engagement with analytics and finding solutions to improve processes and teams. They of course love Teams, and they're using Planner and Forms. Then we've got our tenacious reporters, as Stephen said, in DWTV, which is actually Microsoft Stream. The journalists are looking for team success stories with user-generated content demonstrating the business value. They share on DWTV, and they're looking to find more pioneers, and they love Stream. So some of the content that are in the Pioneer Hub, so we're using a tactic called Less Email Campaign. You've probably seen it out there. It might be called No Email Campaign, but we realise that email and Outlook is not going away. It's not being decommissioned. You still need it for external third parties, for maybe one-to-one confidentiality communication between someone that's a bit more senior than you, and you might attach a link to a couple of documents. But you also need it for to receive alerts and notifications from maybe SharePoint documents that have been shared with you, and back conversations that are going on in Teams. So the way this works is a leader emails their staff on a Thursday to introduce the Less Email campaign, which will start on the following Monday. And if a colleague forgets to email you, then politely remind them to post in Teams and see you in Teams. But what you can do as well, if you get that email off of someone, you can always forward that email using the forward to the channel link that is in Teams, which is really very useful. There's also, Stephen mentioned Scavenger Hunt. So this has been developed by another consultancy, I think in the US, called Talk Social to Me. Some of you might know the work of Carrie Basham Young. So she's designed these really great resources, and you can do these fun sessions, maybe in one of those Friday coffee catch-up meetings with your colleagues. So there are three levels. You've got beginner level, intermediate level, and there's one for team owners. And I heard just on the call, one of the workshop calls the other day, one of the girls on the call said she's already lined up to run a scavenger hunt because there's some people in her team that are lagging behind and are not as confident as the others with their team's digital literacy. And this is a fun way to kind of like nurture your colleagues along and, you know, show that empathy with them. So I mentioned earlier about capturing success stories. So this is a format that we're using. So the panel on the left shows their, it's really small here, but it's showing the current state, where they've started from, the pain points and challenges. And then the three boxes along the bottom are showing their new way of working, their better way of working, their improved way of working using Teams, and the apps that they might be bringing in there. So we've got here work on the go in Teams mobile apps, and I've got here all hands employee events, so two very different ways of using Teams. We also introduced them to what Stephen has now renamed as Try It cards, which he's got in his SharePoint site for the Pioneer Hub in Teams. And this is again bringing back that growth mindset of just try something new, just experiment. So there's some examples here of try using analytics to see how your team is being used, try brainstorming in a whiteboard session, try sending praise, try involving those passive users. That's where scavenger hunts could come in really useful. Try using that bulky old email newsletter, getting rid of that you have to email around every week with or every month with links and pictures in it. Try just turning it into a Teams area. Try moving Skype for business meetings to Teams, which is radically happening within DWP. Try sharing a document in Teams rather than in email, and try offering maybe some one-to-one training to someone that's struggling. So another exercise that we looked at was to show them how Teams is that kind of like a window pane, and how Teams is a hub into lots of other Office 365 applications, and helping them again on how the pioneers can help to scale. So we, if you ignore the red text that's over the top of it for a second, the way we pulled together the whole kind of workshop aspect of the discovery sessions and the go beyond sessions over the last month with Sanity and Stephen and his colleagues is these are the different kind of aspects that we brought in, but really we were working through that pane of that Windows Teams pane of glass. So to manage our comings and goings as the project team, we use Planner. To of course, using the content as we've done here, we're using PowerPoint. The Pioneers Hub was created in SharePoint. We're running this meeting in a live event, but we've been running our workshops sessions in Teams meetings. We used a sticky note boards, a whiteboards, a Teams whiteboard session with sticky notes, and the recordings are going into DWP TV, and we're using feedback forms at the end of all of these workshops to capture whether they'd like to come back to the second workshop. So it's really important that they fill out that form, and also to capture kind of their feedback on how we can continuously improve those sessions because they're so new. And we're using OneNote digital notebook to capture our actions and notes going forwards. But over the top, I've laid, you know, the example of these fictitious roles and how we've all been pivoting, switching hats. And 1 minute we're scientists, astronauts, entertainers, thought leaders, and journalists. So the whiteboard sessions that we ran, so I open up the whiteboard and I say to them, right, you have a think now, everything you've heard, what do you now plan to try that you haven't done before? Put your growth mindset head on or hat on, and we do a kind of like 5 minutes for them to put Post-it notes up on that one. Then on the other side of the so that's kind of like the left side of the whiteboard, and then on the right side we ask them, are there any DWP processes where Teams might enable improvement? And there's going to be hundreds of these. This is a massive you know, public sector organisation or department. So the first time we tried this, we were really nervous. We really didn't think it was going to work very well. Anyway, it works a treat. We actually have to say to them, stop putting up Post-it notes. I think we had nearly 30 the other day, and even though I could zoom out on the whiteboard, we were like running out of space. So it's just brilliant for us to now go through those, collate this feedback. We also use chat as well to capture some feedback using these two ideas, and it's actually given us real focus as a project team on where we can actually get more support. And it was lovely to see how sophisticated and intellectual now some of these team owners are in using Teams and what they're asking for. Really impressed what they you know, pushing now, not just that usual kind of like getting started and you know what the team owners the admin area and that sort of thing, but real pushing the envelope now on what they want in Teams. So we say to them, your mission, should you choose to accept it, because astronauts go where no employee has gone before. If they you know, as I said, there's a second part to the discovery workshop. We want them now to go beyond, motivate and inspire. They don't have to come back to that session. Everyone's busy. It's an intense, department supporting obviously the benefits area and recruitment. So it might not be timely for them to come back. But if they do come back, this is where the recognition comes in. We give them a Pioneer Digital badge, which is visible on their Office 365 profile, and we also give them access to the exclusive Pioneer Hub. So they won't get the resources that we've talked about, and there's more there as well, and we haven't got time to go into it now, but there is a lot more there, but they only get access if they come back to that session. And this is where we create, I put on there the hashtags FOMO, fear of missing out, and if you're an MVP, we all know about the hashtag that we love called Community Rocks, because that's what we're trying to build here, kind of like this lovely community. And we don't want to call it unique or exclusive, but at the moment it is that way, because we want them to feel like they are VIPs and they are special, and they're doing, going beyond and going that extra mile for themselves and their colleagues. If they come back to the session, we do ask them to do a bit of homework, but because we ran the whiteboard session, they've actually already started the homework, and you can feel their passion and enthusiasm. So we ask them to write their current story of their pain points today, the beginning, middle and end, and then we want them to write their future story. So it's looking at kind of like the processes that they're already used to running, day-to-day ways of working, but we want using kind of like forgetting that Teams even existed, but now they've had a chance to use Teams, we want them to write that future story and the apps that they're using as well. And the fact that we've already captured 8 success stories, and that's part, they are there on the Pioneer Hub for them to look at how others are working. It's kind of like documented. So we are really delighted to say that we've run 3 discovery sessions in the last 2 weeks, attended by 19 people, and all have agreed to come back and take this to another level. So it's a really small group at the moment, but these are kind of like those power users that are going to have hopefully a top-down impact on a lot of people. And we will be running these workshops now, probably I think 4 times a week. I think we're going to be doing it going forward. So it'll be probably 4 discovery workshops and then 4 go beyond workshops. So I'm going to hand the next 2 slides back over to Stephen to do lessons learned and next steps. If he comes off mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
So yes, so as Lesley highlighted there, that the pioneers have been this kind of closed private group where it's a kind of invite only based on the establishment of their previous Teams usage. That's been a key lesson learned for us, because we had started this process with an open kind of invited open door platform of a kind of a traditional champions community. We found that the same people nominated themselves and passed around the invite, and it became a very diluted notice board and kind of indirect support portal, which made the emphasis and kind of the change culture very much diluted. So one of our key ones is to kind of keep that closed, keep it for key people who want to make a difference, not to create a platform where people can post negative comments, ask kind of shortcuts to our support techie guys, use it to really cascade the knowledge, cascade the training, and drive that adoption through a close-knit community. Also, it's been mindful that people learn in different ways. We've created a growing library of content, whether that's across our corporate Microsoft Stream channel, where people can subscribe and learn at their own pace, or based on like vanilla recordings of the training sessions. So be mindful that people might learn best that way. We've got tricards that Lesley referred to, where it's a step-by-step process where people want to go through in their own pace at their own time, step 1, step 2, step 3. But also we've got people who will always want to attend a traditional training session where they're sat with a obviously virtually these days, sat with a trainer from Sanity, where they'll go through, have an interactive Q&A session, get a bit more hand holding, and so we'll have to make that provision for all sort of learning styles. With that in mind, though, keep it simple. Don't make it a kind of a technical delivery element. Don't make it overwhelming for people. And that's why we're trying to rebrand things in our own terminology. So we refer to our main training and adoption hub as the Learn Hub or the Pioneer Hub. Users, particularly within our department, who are not used to new solutions coming on a weekly or monthly basis, get overwhelmed with the concept of SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Stream, Planner, Forms all coming at them at once. So as that slide earlier that Lesley referred to, we've delivered content using different platforms across Office 365, but not necessarily put them terms or put them individual applications in front of people because it became overwhelming. So keep it simple, try and identify them quick wins, don't plug or push the individual products. And they're very much a top-down approach, so get buy-in from key stakeholders at the top, make sure that they are comfortable using Teams, drive it down so that particularly in-house, it was very much a day-to-day concept that everything would be hosted via a Skype broadcast or a general Skype meeting. Get them to change their key meetings towards Teams, deliver virtual events via Teams rather than traditional approaches. Drive that down from the top to cascade them skills across all users. So that's kind of the key lessons that we've learned so far. But we'll get there. We've got another 60,000 of employees to go, and I'm sure we could come back again and the lessons learned will have changed. Back to you, Lesley. Oh no, so sorry, yeah, so like I say, we've got another 60,000 to go in terms of getting to that 100,000 estate usage. The key drivers behind that are obviously to get Skype for Business turned off. So that clock is still very much ticking for us in terms of the decommissioning of Skype for July next year. We want to engage with as many people as possible, so that's touching upon the pioneers and getting them to wave the Teams flag for us rather than it come from us as a technology team. So creating that new style of training, making sure we drive an on-demand concept so that we have more time with people like Lesley and the Sanity guys to really change that culture rather than we sat delivering hundreds of sessions a week. Try and embrace that new style of training where it's on demand as much as possible, and create showcase events. So very much share the success stories, create showcases where this is how you should be using Teams or how we see you as in your kind of identified user scenario of using Teams. Create that showcase event and show them all the bells and whistles that 365 can bring. Over to you, Lesley, to kind of go through the final steps.
Yeah, thank you. So we'd just like to just nearly finished. So Satya Nadella tells us be passionate and bold, always keep learning. You stop doing useful things if you don't learn. And, you know, he's been instrumental in driving a huge culture change with diversity inclusion programs, not just for staff, but in the partner and MVP communities, and amazing work in efforts in the healthcare technology space with artificial intelligence. So on that note, Sanity have developed a Teams COVID desk booking and trace app. If you're interested in this, then please contact me, because we're going to run out of time today. But this has been developed for DWP and also another customer of ours in the insolvency service, and we're just coming to the just finished the development of that and just commissioning that with DWP. There's the Envision conference is on. I think it's just coming to a close now. That's been the Microsoft conference, and they just launched yesterday the Get On 2021 campaign with Microsoft and the government, and DWP are very much involved in that. And just to round up, I work at Sanity. We're a Microsoft Gold communications partner with advanced specialities in Microsoft Teams calling and meeting rooms. The adoption service is kind of like a newer service in the last, it's been building up over the last year. And we have, as you can see there with this very busy slide of logos, of wallpaper logo slide. These are the companies that we've worked with over the last few years. And we have 3 MVPs, so it's me, Lee Ford and Randy Chapman, and we like to think that yeah, so we are this year we've migrated over 40,000 people to Teams and run over 300 interactive training sessions, and by the end of 2020 we are expected and forecast to have migrated over 125,000 people to Teams. And that's the close of our session. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Lesley.
Have you got time for any questions?
Yes. No, that was a great session, and you know, there's a lot to take in there, and I think it's very interesting that, you know, the techniques, the tools that you're trying, and fully support in what you were saying, that, you know, if you don't try, you ain't going to find out how it's going to turn out. So what's the risk? Just keep trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, we have one question from Simon Thompson. The question is, can you shed a little more light on your learning platform that you were discussing about, in terms of what does it use, and how are people using it?
So yeah, I can certainly take that one, Lesley. So basically, we initially went down the approach of actually deploying the out of the box learning pathways solution that is available on GitHub that Microsoft provide. So we initially went down that route, but due to technical dependencies, we couldn't do that within our estate. So we've basically just created an in-house version of that. So it's hosted within SharePoint Online. It's a series of SharePoint pages utilizing document libraries and the web ports to make it look engaging and kind of user-friendly. We've also then started embedding videos that we're hosting on our corporate-wide Microsoft Stream / DWP TV instance. So again, combining the different learning styles, whether that's a video, links to the live events and the meetings that the Sanity guys are hosting on a weekly basis, pulling that all together within one hub. So in terms of solutions and technology, it's just SharePoint and Stream,
Right.
all the capabilities that brings.
Sure. No, that's great. No, thanks for that. And obviously that platform is, you know, evolving constantly. SharePoint's housing, so that's good to know. I had a couple of questions, if I may, and I think I would just want to give chance to the attendees to come up with some questions in the next couple of minutes, if they can. But the question I had was in DWP area. So do you use like a test environment? Did you have like a development tenant to try some of these things out in terms of with Microsoft Teams sort of things? How do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, so we have a totally separate kind of alpha tenant, we refer to it as. So this is our sandbox environment where we can test and scope out some of the new features that we want to deploy, as well as test out some of the new tools. So Lesley referred to one of them there about the requested desk booking app, and we've also implemented request a team solution. All that sort of stuff went through our sandbox alpha environment first, and
Right.
we would do that testing within that environment before it did go out to our production live environment that would potentially impact all the 100,000 users.
Sure. Right. Okay. The other question I had was more around, I normally find in my sort of workspace areas, you know, to try and book people's time to come up to, you know, to these workshops of, you know, different exercises and everything else. In terms of the leeway, like the turnaround of getting people to come to those workshops and also being committed to that, how did you find that experience? Because I know you mentioned a few discovery and exercises there, but in terms of that, sending those invites out, getting people to the you know, to that virtual meeting, if you like, what was that experience like?
It was probably surprisingly a lot more straightforward than we first anticipated, pure on the basis that because we targeted people that were already exploring the Teams environment, testing things, pushing the boundaries in terms of coming back to us and saying we want to do this in Teams? Is this possible yet? Whenever we're getting these features, because we targeted them by using the Graph API in terms of the metrics and giving scorings to what people were using and how they were using it within Teams. That made the sales pitch in terms of being a pioneer coming along to these sessions a lot easier, because they were already doing it themselves, just not necessarily knowing it or in a kind of a formulated structure. So that was key. Whereas if we had kind of started going out across our internet and started asking for volunteers, we probably would have found it a lot more painstaking or a lot more time consuming. But because we used data that didn't lie in terms of these guys were already using the platform, it made it a lot easier to do that sales pitch in terms of come along, get access to added resource, and kind of be our pioneer, go out and discover.
Sure. Okay, that's good. I've got a couple more questions that's just come in, so I'll probably read them out to you. In terms of first question I have from Paul Turner regarding your test environment, do you give access to end users for testing, or is it just the IT Sanity testing? I think you mentioned briefly just now that you have an alpha test. So is that for select users or for just subset of users?
So yeah, it's mainly for IT Sanity testing, but we when we first went in that kind of early beta phase, we actually used our alpha tenant to have alpha and test users within there. So we had a few hundred users that we set up accounts in our alpha tenant and they used it. So we weren't just doing it from a techie Microsoft perspective. We were actually getting real users in there and getting their feedback and doing them kind of cycles of testing feedback, exploring with real life users.
Right. And how much time, we have a question from Mark, how much time per week, per month did the pioneers commit to their adoption role?
So again, we haven't gone down the path of saying they have to commit 10 hours a month to it, because we identified these guys who were already going out encouraging other people to use Teams and how they can change their ways of working. They had already indirectly committed their own time to it, so it wasn't something that we were asking them to do. They were actually already doing it within their roles. So to answer the question, there's been no other time commitment other than the 2 hours of the sessions that the Sanity guys are running with them in terms of them 2 workshops. Other than that, it'll just be as and when they're available to attend our ad hoc drop-in sessions that we're going to do to kind of drive that material throughout the department. Right. So very limited in terms of time.
So the first 2 hours almost mandatory for everybody, and then from there on at their pace with those workshops that they come into it.
100%. We give them the material up front, and then they can utilize it as much or as little as they need to achieve that adoption in their area.
Okay, good. We've got a question from Andrew Doran. Intrigued as to what is under the Learn app that appeared in your screenshots there, and whether that's default for everyone.
Yes. So yeah, like I said, that Learn app or the Learn Hub is just a SharePoint site with the various web clips and kind of making that look as presentable and engaging as possible. All we've then done is created a custom Teams app on the back of that. So basically just exported that, created the manifest file and imported that as a custom Teams app. So that is actually pinned as a custom Teams app across all Teams users by default. So when they either onboarded from day one or during their adoption cycle of Teams, that Learn app is pinned down the left-hand side of their Teams interface.
Good, very neat. Okay, I think that's all we have for questions. So I just want to say, a big thanks to both of you, Stephen and Lesley, for giving up your time and effort and presenting us great content there. And I think there's probably something for everyone to learn and take away things and apply in their organization. So thanks for that. And okay, so hi everyone, welcome back after being the session with Lesley and Stephen with regards to the adoption session at DWP, which was a great session. And so the recordings will be made available if you did miss that out. But the next session we have is about protecting your teamwork with Microsoft 365. And we have Joanne Klein with us live from Canada. And she's already had a busy morning presenting elsewhere at ESPC 20. So, you know, we really thank you, Joanne, for being here with us at M365 UK. And thank you for your time and the effort that you've given up to be here. So for those of you who are new to M365 UK, this is a monthly community event that we make it happen. And so we'll post the links to the slides and the session recordings later on, but you can see the links are there as well. So if you haven't already subscribed, then please do so. So what I want to do is just introduce Joanne. And so Joanne's session, you know, Joanne specializes a four-time MVP who works within the SharePoint space, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, and you know, I follow her blog regularly. You know, she writes well, and the blog site is at joannecklein.com. And so you know, a lot of material, and I tend to point my clients to Joanne's blog as well for any kind of how-tos. But you know, I just want to appreciate that, you know, how much time it goes into that. So, you know, thank you for that, Joanne. But I'll just hand over the session to you now, Joanne. So with that, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my slides.
Yeah.
All right, and can I get a thumbs up that you can hear me? Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for extending the invitation to join your user group. This is a thrill for me to go on the other side of the Atlantic and join your user group. So that's awesome. Okay, this is me. I've already received an introduction, but I do want to talk about my role and why I focus on these areas. I am an independent consultant, and all of my customers, for the most part, I focus on the security and compliance aspect for them, which is where a lot of the material comes from. So I'm boots on the ground. I dig in on all of these features, and warts and all, I work with them day to day. So hopefully my learnings I can share along with you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them. So agenda for today, we're going to cover a lot of material. This is a very large space, so I've had to pick and choose a little bit, the nuggets along the way. But for the most part, we're going to talk about protecting, retaining, and collaborating with external users and kind of viewing that through a governance lens or a governance perspective. You've probably seen this slide before and these numbers before if you've attended any kind of Microsoft sessions, so I won't dwell on this, but these numbers are high. And the concern from organizations is protecting your data, and particularly with COVID-19, that problem has even been exacerbated on people and organizations feel their information is at risk. Number one concern is being able to comply with regulations with the sensitive data that's across your organization. There's a company in Canada called Habanero Consulting, and they put out a survey to a bunch of different companies, more than 5,300 survey responses. And their focus was mostly on the employee experience during COVID-19, but it's an excellent study. I would encourage you to download it and look at what they discovered. What I want to hone in on for purposes of this presentation are these two numbers, pre-COVID and post-COVID. The work from home frequency, you can see those numbers. So we've gone from 6% all the way up to 45%. So this concern is not going away, and security and compliance teams really need to get in front of this work from home idea. And if you feel that there's a risk of your data being at risk because of it. So because of this, we really need to focus in on this issue. So I like to talk about not all teams being created equal. So you can't paint all teams with the same broad governance brush, and it's because as this diagram is showing, it depends where your team or your site is provisioned on the governance that's going to be on it. And across any and all of these, you can have sensitive content. So whatever system we implement, we need to be able to address this model. It's not going to be contained nice and neatly, likely, in one or two particular sites. So Microsoft's recommendation in order to approach this and get in front of this is something they called the shared responsibility model. And that's a shared responsibility between Microsoft, who brings in all of the regulations and ensures their services are compliant with it, but it's also you as an organization, and a team working for your organization is responsible for the data, the identities, and the devices. So together, you're going to meet your regulatory obligations. So that's one partnership. The other one is just within your own organization, and it takes that coordinated effort of 3 key groups in your organization. First is the largest group, which would be your business information workers, end users, whatever term you use to describe these personas in your organization. They work with the content day in and day out, creating new, sometimes sensitive content, possibly sharing it with external parties. This is a huge concern for most organizations. So on the one hand, you have the end users. So they're collaborating, might be working with external parties. They want to work, you know, from anywhere, from any device, but they want to be productive and efficient. So striking the balance is all of the controls you can implement, and there's a lot of them. This is just a list of some of them. I'm not going to go through all these today, but to be clear, you have typically a team of people that focuses in on a number of these in order to implement some of the protection and security controls. So you're constantly trying to strike that balance between these two often competing forces. First thing I want to talk about when it comes to business information workers is the onus is on us to help them make what I'm calling a digital mind shift. And there's a few key areas I want to focus in on. One is understanding how they can effectively use the modern collaboration tools. And so the first session in this user group was talking about exactly that. Then how to collaborate securely across all networks. So not only within your organization, but also outside of your network. How do you do that? Don't assume end users know. And part of this is shifting from that in-person mindset to an online mindset. And many organizations and staff within them have been forced into this in a hurry with the COVID-19 and the work from home program that they were kind of forced into in a quick way. And to be cyber secure. Now, October happens to be National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I don't know who is aware of that, but Microsoft, I'm going to share these slides, and this is a link to their blog. They're going to be focusing a lot this month on everything related to cybersecurity. So those people in those teams in your organization should be periodically checking into that and seeing what kind of resources they have. Microsoft partnered with Terranova Security a few months back, and what they've come up with is some really great end user courses that you can download for free to try to help with that cybersecurity training in your organization. I would encourage you to download these, take a look at them. It's PowerPoint presentations, a few infographics. Just find some creative ways of sharing this with your staff if you're not already doing some kind of a cybersecurity anti-phishing campaign in your organization. And another great way is to get team owners to sign off on a teamwork agreement. So You should have a pretty good understanding of what it means to be a team owner in your organization, and make sure team owners know what that is. Based on your team's classification, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, what are the rules of the road on how you are allowed to collaborate within that team? And end users need to understand what is considered sensitive in your own organization, and are they dealing with sensitive information within their own team. And once a team, if it's eventually done, comes to end of life, what do you do with the not only the container, so the group or the site that it's in, but also the content within it? Can you just delete it, or does it need to move to a more permanent location? You need to get in front of it and address all of these concerns. Some of these controls, the training program, the site classification, it's best if you can somehow incorporate it into your site provisioning process. So that was group number one. Group number two would be any of these compliance teams, legal risk, information managers, records management team. These teams understand an organization's duty to preserve information long past the business value that maybe information workers might recognize and need it for. And this can be for a number of reasons. It can be for maybe you have a little litigation action going against you, or you have regulatory obligations you need to adhere to, and you need to retain things for a certain period of time or get rid of them after a certain period of time. And maybe you're have contractual obligations like PCI DSS compliance. So all of these obligations, these teams are keenly aware of what the rules are and are going to want to work with you, the IT team, to implement some of these controls. And that's where many of the security and compliance teams come in. So they kind of bridge that gap between the technical controls, what they can do, understanding and working with those compliance teams, and then bridging that gap to the end user experience, that balance that we're always trying to strike. Also, often this team is involved in training some of the compliance teams on some of these capabilities, because it's not just an IT role. Sometimes it's not an IT role at all. We need to train these compliance teams to get back into that IT admin center and understand, monitor some of the reporting and dashboarding and controls that are back there. E-discovery is another one. So if we want to implement some controls, I like looking at this through a governance lens. Governance is an overused word, and there's all kinds of governance. So what I'm talking about here is specifically container and content governance and security governance. They largely fall into one of these two buckets. So another good way of demonstrating this is to talk about personas. And we've got 3 different organizational personas. They're just fictitious, and you're likely kind of within one of these 3. There's a restrictive setting, something like a bank. There's an organization that likes to always try to strike that balance, compromising between the controls and the end user experience. And then there's a more agile organization that their focus is on driving productivity. So 3 extreme examples, perhaps, but demonstrate what the controls might look like. So if we look at these 3 personas and self-service site creation, they might treat this very differently. John at the bank, they might have a strict approval process. They got it all automated. They're controlling the names of their groups, and they've got protection and retention applied. The middle of the road group, they do have site designs, but they allow end users to provision them, and then they follow up after the fact, which is another model I see lots of organizations using. And then there's the more just use the out-of-the-box controls, haven't limited any people across the organization from creating them, and I work with several clients like this as well. You just have to be a little bit careful about that one, but their feeling is they don't want to get in end users' way. All right, so when we think of container and content governance, we're thinking about protecting your teamwork, but we're really focused in on the sensitive teamwork here. That's what we want to protect, and then retention, of course. So many different controls and features in the back end of the Security and Compliance Center would fit into what I call container and content governance. I'm not going to cover all of these today. The ones with the star beside them, I'm going to touch on. To be clear, likely each one of these could be their own session. These are big features, have little nuances throughout them. So I'm just trying to give you a flavor, a taste for how you might want to use and where you will see some of these features across your tenant. So remember, we want to protect our sensitive teamwork, but we want to do it wherever it lives. You remember that triangle diagram. Doesn't matter if it's in a communication site, on your intranet, or a Microsoft Teams that a group of 5 are working on. If the content is sensitive, you want to protect it. First place to start is getting ready, and there's a few tangible things you need to do to get ready. Protection, defining your protection tiers, defining your classification scheme, coming up with a high-level glossary of terms, and of course, end user training. Understand where your data is. What kind of sensitive data do you have floating around your environment? And is it being shared externally? Just get a really good feel for what is out there. Sensitivity labels are what you use within Microsoft 365 in order to identify and protect your teamwork. And then you can use data loss prevention to also govern your sensitive data. Lots of changes are going on in these spaces right now. Microsoft is spending a lot of time and energy on their engineering teams working on new capabilities to make these more robust and to really protect your data, which speaks, I think, to the concern that people have about the data within their organization. So I'm going to talk about some of those new capabilities today. Microsoft recommends defining protection tiers in your organization. The blog post I'm referring to at the bottom is them suggesting 3 tiers, and that's what I'm showing here. The baseline, public and private, they consider 1 tier. It's just separated by the privacy of it, but come up with your 3 tiers. And the reason they want you to do that is although you don't have to use their suggestions, you need to make it your own, but it does allow you to standardize your controls across those 3 tiers, which is super helpful because when you get in the back end of security and compliance, there are so many options. And in order to, I guess, simplify it and standardize it, a great approach is to define protection tiers in your own organization. Some questions you can ask yourself when you're deciding what kind of controls you want to put in each one of your tiers. Here are examples. This is not the exhaustive list, but it is a list of questions to kind of get you started to thinking about each one of the tiers and maybe how you might want to have those defined. The last bullet point is defining a sensitivity label for the protection tier to control those things, which gets you into your data classification scheme. Here's an example of one. This is similar to Microsoft's, and I want to point out 2 things about this. One is it's fairly simple, which is important because end users at times are going to be confronted with the decision on which of these classifications or sensitivities to apply to something, either a container, site team or group, or at a more granular level, an email or a document. So it's important that it's fairly simple, not too complicated. Also, the 4 terms are they're completely separate from each other. They're not ambiguous. It's very clear that highly confidential is more confidential than confidential is. If you had top secret and confidential, I don't think that would be a good choice because that kind of leaves a little bit of room for confusion on, well, which one is actually more confidential. So I like these terms. They're simple, they're straightforward. So come up with that for your own organization. High-level glossary of terms. I heard this idea from another MVP of mine, and I think it's a friend of mine, and I think it's a great example. Part of this is change management and communication to your business information workers across your organization. You're going to start using some terms some of them may not be familiar with. So from the get-go, come up with what those terms are and straightforward explanation of what they mean. Sensitive information. What do you mean by that in your organization? What does protection mean? What does sensitivity label mean? Define those terms up front, even for your project team, so everybody's talking the same language. Last week, Microsoft came out on their tech community blog with some really good sensitivity label training, free to download. It's got PowerPoint presentations, email templates, all kinds of things to help with increasing the knowledge of your staff on sensitivity labels and data classification. I would highly recommend to go download them, make them your own. You don't have to take them verbatim what they have, but a really good starting point if you're wondering how to approach this. So the next thing is understanding where your current sensitive data is. So I love this saying, and Microsoft did this at Ignite last year. Because end users are constantly working in the environment, even if you thought you had a handle on it yesterday, today you don't any longer. You have to be vigilant on having oversight on what kind of content is in your environment. So it's really important for you to use the tools in the back end to help with this. So you need to know, is it being protected and retained, or do we have sensitive information in somebody's OneDrive that they're sharing externally? You need to know this. A way of doing this is something called data classification. And this is a feature in the Compliance Center, and I typically assign members of the governance teams in your organization access to this, so they can go in and take a look at what's going on. You can use two key features in it that they typically leverage. Is one called Content Explorer, and you can see where sensitive information types are located across Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Where sensitivity labels being used and where retention labels being used. And you can get right down to the document or email level, depending on the permission role that you've assigned. And then on the Activity Explorer side, you can see activities being done against labeled content. If the file was printed, you can get really granular here. And this is why it takes a concerted effort by those compliance teams, even staffing up, to dig into some of these things. So this is where you see it in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. It's going to be an option on the left-hand side. I think this is an advanced compliance add-on. Up top, you can see the sensitive information types and trainable classifiers you have defined in your environment. But you can also dig into the Content Explorer. So remember I said you can see within Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive on the left-hand side, you can see all of the different types of information that are there. So sensitive information types. There is about 100 and right now, and at the recent Ignite conference, Microsoft announced 45 new ones and 11 improved ones. So they're really trying to fine tune these sensitive information types because a lot of these features leverage those sensitive information types. So they have to be accurate as they can make them. And they're always adding more. So you can see here's a number of sensitive information types, and this is a graphical representation of it. You can look at it just in a text format as well, but it gives you an idea of where the content is in your organization. Sensitivity labels. This is from my own tenant. So these are my sensitivity labels, and you can see I've labeled 8 as customer, 9 is super secret, etc. And these are all clickable. You can click in and see the actual documents and emails that are within that group. Same visual for retention labels. On the Activity Explorer side, on the bottom, you can see where a file was created, if it was copied to the clipboard. You can get really granular on the kinds of activity that you are monitoring across your tenant. Okay, so let's get into sensitivity labels. A sensitivity label can do many things. It can apply just visual content markings, which helps the end user understand the kind of content that is being presented to them or that they're working with. But it can also apply protection or encryption, which means kind of rights management. These are all of the granular permission controls you can put on a sensitivity label. And there's two fairly new features on the client side. So when you're working in your Office app, sensitivity labels can be automatically applied based on the content that you're putting in there. For instance, if you're typing in a credit card number, it would recognize that in the moment and either automatically apply or recommend, however you've configured it, that you put a confidential sensitivity label on that document. Okay, so that's on the client side. On the service side, so all of the legacy at-rest content you have in SharePoint and OneDrive, there's an auto apply labeling functionality as well. It will use the same rules you've defined and then go out and apply sensitivity labels to that legacy content. So a really good feature for managing all of the existing content you have out there. So pretty excited about this one. On the Exchange side, it only does exchange emails, pardon me, that you send out. It doesn't go back and do all of the at-rest emails that you've previously sent. Okay, I'm just going to sit on this screen for a moment and show you these are sensitivity labels and the look of them across numerous apps in Microsoft 365. Some have an information protection bar, which is dependent on the type of add-in or the type of client you have on the app. You can see Office for the web. It will also present the sensitivity toolbar. iOS Outlook app, I have an iOS device. So the idea behind this is make it consistent for the information worker. So when they're working on a document, it doesn't matter which application they're in, they're going to see sensitivity as the toolbar option. They click it, they're going to see the same options no matter where they are. That's the end user usability side of this, and one that I think makes it a little bit easier to train end users on. All right, two features that I want to talk about. If you came from the legacy world of sensitivity labels, if you tried to open up a document that had protection or encryption, you would have been presented with this error message in online. But now that feature is gone and we will be able to open and edit these protected documents in Office Online, which is very important because a lot of these sensitive documents we will want to apply protection on. This means it now opens up co-authoring, they're searchable, which opens up other possibilities, data loss prevention, e-discovery. So those are key benefits of allowing us to open up an encrypted file. And I talked about auto labeling those files at rest in SharePoint. So you're not relying on end users remembering to label something. If you have this capability, it can go back and auto label them for you. And you're going to start seeing this sensitivity column in SharePoint lists and libraries, and you can sort on it, filter on it. It's just like a regular column in SharePoint. You can search on it. All right, so site and group settings, when you're setting up your sensitivity label, it's more than just a document or an email setting. You can also define site and group settings, site, team, or group settings. So first one is the privacy of the group. Is it private or is it public if this label was applied to it? Will you allow guest access? And what kind of controls do you have for unmanaged devices, which translates into conditional access for those that are familiar with that in Azure. If you come in from a non-domain join device, on a confidential site, are you going to block access? Are you going to allow web-only access? What are the controls you're putting on there? So here is an example on this board of directors site. Under policies, sensitivity will now be a setting at the site level. So in here, I'm setting highly confidential. And when I go to the board of directors site, you're going to see that sensitivity setting up near the name of it. That's been around for a while. You can wire up this highly confidential sensitivity setting to a URL. So I always suggest have some kind of governance site on your tenant where you describe what it means for all of your different site sensitivity settings. And this is for an end user lift, so they understand what that means and the proper handling controls when they're on a site that has a certain type of sensitivity. So here's another example. If we've got a top secret sensitivity label, I'm just going to go back here, and we've got it private, we don't allow external users, and we allow limited web-only access. What you're going to see on the site is as soon as you set top secret, you now will no longer be able to set the privacy settings because that's pulling it from the sensitivity setting. You're going to see that up on the top underneath team. We won't be able to add a guest user as a member to the site because that's a site sensitivity setting. And if you are on an unmanaged device, this was allowing only web-only access. So that yellow bar is coming from there saying you aren't allowed to download, print, or sync. You have to just use the content on the web. So some controls, more coming. Based on the sensitivity you're setting. Brand new is kind of separating out the definition of those sensitivities at the file and email level and at the group and site level. And this is in public preview right now. You can see you can have some sensitivity labels that aren't applicable to groups and sites and some that aren't applicable to files and emails. So this is where you're starting to get a little bit more separation between the two. On the groups and sites side, we can now set external sharing policies, which is really important. So depending on what site it is, let's say it was a confidential site, we would only want people in our organization to have access, no external sharing allowed. So here is a video from Microsoft on setting external sharing policies. This is a confidential site. They're trying to share it with someone from Gmail, they cannot do it. You can see that setting is only allowing people in their organization. So a really good control. This is assuming you've already done your homework as a security compliance teams working with the compliance departments in your organization on what does it mean when we define a site as confidential. So that's getting back to those protection tiers and your data classification. You really need to have that firmed up, and then the controls just fall into place beyond that. Okay, data loss prevention, another way to govern teamwork. You have numerous controls at play, kind of working in tandem with each other to protect your teamwork. So a DLP policy is great for preventing sensitive content from being shared. So it leverages those sensitive information types as well. Coming is you'll soon be able to use a sensitivity label as a condition, which is a good way of tying those two controls together. So you can have DLP in Outlook or Exchange, in SharePoint, you can have it in Teams. So it'll detect that you're on a team that has somebody that's not in your organization is a guest on the team or has access to the team. It will detect that and it will block certain content. So here's what this looks like. In these particular examples, I've got some sensitive information, a customer number on the left-hand side, and same on the right-hand side. I'm trying to share a file externally that has sensitive information. You're going to get a policy tip. That's from DLP telling you either you can't do it or it might allow it but require you to override, and then enter your justification. So these are all settings you can do for data loss prevention in the back end that drive that end user experience. In Microsoft Teams, if I'm in my team and I share a social insurance number, which is considered sensitive in this tenant, it blocks a message, tells me that. In this case, the what can I do is a hyperlink, and it allows me to override it, send it anyway, and enter a justification, which is logged. Or I can outright block it as well. So what the recipient would receive when that is blocked is just this. So they won't see the content at all. All right, DLP, there's 3 new features I want to talk about that are pretty important for this. First is sensitive by default. How data loss prevention works is on, it basically works off the SharePoint search index. So if you're familiar with how the SharePoint crawl works, there is a bit of a delay between when the document gets added to SharePoint, when it's crawled and shows in search. Because of that delay, Microsoft has introduced a PowerShell command to make brand new content sensitive by default until it goes through steps 1 through 5. It's crawled and you know definitively whether it's sensitive or not. Okay, so it's a good protection control to have in place. Another one is, this is new, block anyone with the link option for sensitive content. So in DLP, when you're setting that up, you can detect that it's got sensitive information and then prevent anyone from sending that with anyone with the link option. So what that looks like in here is we've got a US financial data DLP policy, and we're saying if you find this, don't allow anyone with the link option, even if the site had it. Okay, so they are trying to send it, and you can see anyone with the link is grayed out because that has sensitive information on it. There again, a really good control. We need to attack this from several different angles in order to protect our data completely. So I talked about striking the balance before, but it's definitely not perfect. You can probably think of exceptions all over the place, and it is a constant, I would say, compromise. So on the one hand are all the security controls, and there is a lot of them. This is not, of course, an exhaustive list. You know, it could go on for a very long time. On the other side is, what can we do to enable productivity? So you can see things like those tool tips, the visual markings on the document, allowing people to co-author and collaborate on protected documents. Those are all things, making them searchable, all things that Microsoft is trying to bring in so that end users can still get their work done while we're still securing and protecting the data. So that's the challenge. So if we think about our 3 personas again, so John, they automatically apply sensitivity labels to their content, and they use data loss prevention across all their locations, and they don't allow any access from unmanaged devices. Kate, they allow their users to collaborate freely with external parties, but they're currently monitoring, so using data classification on what is being shared externally right now, what kind of sensitive information do we have, and we're going to build some policies based on that. And Chad, they apply a default sensitivity label, because you can do default if you want, or you can force end users to always manually pick one. They allow external sharing on all sites, and they allow full access even from unmanaged devices. So 3 very different ways of approaching the same thing. Retention. So retention at a high level can do one of 3 things. It can outright retain, it can retain, and then the end of that retention period, it can delete, or maybe not so obvious, but it can just delete. So ensure we don't have this content any longer than X. The idea behind retention in Microsoft 365 is it's built-in compliance. You're generally retaining it right where end users are working. Sometimes you move it to a different library or a different site if it's archived. Those are kind of sidebar cases. You can do that, but by and large, the idea is you retain in place. So depending on if it's a retention policy or a retention label, and there are different mechanisms for retaining content, they're available on different types of workloads. The bottom one I want to point out was just announced at Ignite, and that's when team meeting recordings are stored in OneDrive and SharePoint, which is going to be an option. I think it's rolling out as we speak right now. If they are stored in OneDrive and SharePoint instead of Stream, then you will be able to apply retention against them, which is a good thing. So retention across your teamwork, you can always manually apply retention. Many ways of automatically applying it. And we can now use machine learning and AI to apply retention. So if we look at this, we really want to dig into machine learning and AI to be able to apply retention across scale, at scale across our entire tenant. There's just too much data to do it manually. It's not, it doesn't catch everything, and automated is good, but it's also very difficult to catch all of the content that might be out there. I presented on this and blogged about this many times. These are all the ways to automatically apply a retention label, and this list is growing. Number 10, I just added after Microsoft Ignite, using SharePoint syntax, which is new. It uses AI models to apply, to do many things, but can also apply retention labels and protection labels soon. So trainable classifiers, Microsoft has built-in ones, and you could use that, but this doesn't really fit the retention requirement I see mostly, but you can build your own custom classifiers, which is where I see organizations using this. On the SharePoint syntax side, this is this new feature solution coming out of Project Cortex. You build AI models to extract metadata from documents. So there's a couple different models there, but based on this, if it detects a certain document that kind of meets your model, it can then apply a retention label and soon a sensitivity label. So I've blogged about that. There's a link on the bottom just a couple days ago. I'm pretty impressed with this capability. It works really well. So you define the model once and then you can apply it to many libraries across your site. Last week, speaking of training resources on the tech community, Microsoft also deployed retention label training resources. Same thing, PowerPoints, quizzes, email templates. Leverage these if you're pushing out a retention program in your own organization. Okay, so our three personas. John at the bank, they likely have a well-defined, probably large file plan, and they've got retention labels aligned with that. And they likely have a disposition review where they have to look at the content and decide if it can be deleted or not before deleting it. Kate, they have retention policies published across their environment, and they delete Teams chats after 1 month. Chad, they have a few retention labels for the most valuable content, and they use auto apply where they can, and they never delete Teams chats. So these are all decisions you need to make. Okay, security governance. So we need to learn how to collaborate with external users securely. So managing external sharing is quite involved. At a high level, you're answering these 4 questions, and there's controls for each one of these 4 that you can decide how you want to do it, and you can base it on the sensitivity label setting you have as well. So controlling who can share to external users, many options. If you're familiar with the external sharing settings in the admin center, you'll be familiar with these 2 toggles on the SharePoint and the OneDrive side. Most permissive is everyone can share externally. Or if you have a training program that you can go in your organization where once you go through the training program, you get added to a security group, which means you can now share externally. You can just define it that only people in a certain security group can share externally. I see this done a fair amount. Least permissive is no one can share externally, and I have yet to see that in an organization, but I'm sure it exists. Next is controlling which external users can be shared with. So you can share with anyone, and then they could forward on that link, and that link would work for that second party as well. You can pull it back a little bit and share with only authenticated users, either new and existing or just existing. So existing, maybe if your IT team, they control who is going to be a guest in your tenant. That may be a control that you want. You can get to the domain level. You can either block a specific domain, a competitor domain is a good example of that, or you can allow a specific domain, maybe a partner domain. So you can do it either way. And it can also be set on a per site basis. You can set it up so you're only sharing with specific guests, controlling what can be shared externally. So you can have it so there's no restrictions whatsoever in your tenant. You can control it so that you can block external sharing of sensitive files. And on the right-hand side, there's several features within Microsoft 365 that you can leverage to do this. This is why this is a big topic. You can block external sharing from OneDrive, but allow it from SharePoint. So it depends what you're using OneDrive for in your own organization. Do you have any guidance around that? You can be more targeted and only allow external sharing on specific libraries from SharePoint. And I want to talk about 2 ways to train users on what can be shared externally when you have your communication and change management. One is you should have some kind of a governance site or a page on your company intranet or portal that talks about this kind of stuff. So and give the guidance and the rules of the road, if you will, to information workers in your own organization. Another thing I don't see used that much is a custom help link. It's a PowerShell only option right now, but what it does is when you try to share with somebody and you get an error, you'll get a to learn more, click here. The here link is wherever you want to point them to. So again, point them to a help page on your own intranet. So here I've done it. I'm going to share with somebody at fabricam.com and I've blocked that external domain. So I'm going to get an error. So when I click that hyperlink, it's going to take me to the page I've configured, which is our corporate external sharing policy page. So definitely do this. Arm information workers with the knowledge they need to know how to kind of stay within those guardrails. Control how external sharing is used. So lots of options here. You can have anyone links where that's the default. I rarely see that, but there are controls behind the scenes that you can do on that. So you can have anyone links enabled, but not the default. So maybe you want to give people the option to go to that intentionally if they want, and then have these controls in place. Again, you have to train end users so they are aware of these controls and they know how to responsibly use them. Mandatory anyone link expiration is a great control to have if you are allowing anyone links. And this can be set at a per site level. And setting not only the default link type, which is by default what shows as the first option when you go to send a link. That's a pretty important decision you need to make. Specific people so that can be either internal or external. People with existing access is a good option to prevent oversharing. So only people that currently have access to the site would be able to use that link. The default link permission is either view or edit. Really think about which one you want to default that to. I've had some organizations use view and end users are super frustrated because they just assume it's edit and then the other person can't edit the document and then they have to resend the link. So just make sure you have some communication in front of that one. So the scenarios are John at the bank, they likely would be allowing only specific domains. Kate, they allow users to collaborate. They allow, collaboration with external users. However, they are still trying to define their own classification scheme on how their settings are going to align with that. And Chad, they allow communication with any kind of external party. They don't want to impede their users' ability to do more. So where to start? There's 4 places. One is establish your boundaries. So these are pretty much the hard requirements you have based on your organization's regulations, your compliance teams, the sensitivity of the data that you work with. Based on this, define your protection tiers and then your classification scheme. That's the foundation for absolutely everything. Then understand where your sensitive data is. There's several tools in the back end to help you with that. Enforce and automate the policies, kind of take a crawl, walk, run approach on that. You don't have to boil the ocean, but chip away at the controls you want to implement to move you further in that direction. And then end user education. You really need to get in front of that because, like I said here, an uneducated user will search for ways around your policies and then it's all for naught. Okay, I won't stay on this, but I just talked about the licensing required for pretty much all the capabilities I talked about today where I knew them. And the features that I talked about today as well. I know that my slides are going to be shared through the user group, but this at the bottom is a private link just for your eyes that I have on my slide share, and these slides are available there as well. So I know I talked a lot. It's 11 a.m. Thank you so much for having me, and I will see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Joanne. That was a brilliant session. That was a lot of content.
It was a lot.
I'm lost for words, but no, seriously, thank you very much. And I think, I mean, even because this is constantly evolving, changing constantly. So to try and keep up is one thing, and then let alone diving straight into it. But yeah, very well articulated, from a business perspective. So in terms of what to think about and all those things. So yeah, no, really big thanks for putting all this together and yeah. So just conscious of time as well, because we have got quite a few questions. So I can either let you take a look or I can read them out to you while you can have a glass of water or something.
Okay.
So shall I read them out to you?
Sure.
Okay. So we have first question from where we are. Yeah, we have a question from Andrew Doran. In fact, we got a few questions from him. First question is, one thing that he's noticed with protected content sent by email outside of the org is that the experience for the recipient is quite horrible. Webmail links sometimes don't work, and if the recipient responds, then the web page opens up, which that recipient can't really track what they've sent. Do you know, slightly long question, but do you know if there's any improvements in this area?
I mean, I would probably have 5 questions back to you on the exact setup you have in your environment. It depends. I guess there's a new feature coming called Azure AD B2B, where the recipient experience, whether it's from OneDrive or from SharePoint, is much improved. So they get that one-time passcode kind of wrapper around the email, and they click that, and they will be automatically added as a guest behind the scenes, and the experience is supposed to be much better. So I'm not sure of your setup. That's a challenging question to answer without kind of 3 more questions back to you, but yeah. But Microsoft is keenly aware of the external recipient experience, trying to make that smoother. Yes.
They're getting better.
Yeah.
Can you highlight some, sorry, this is a question from Peter Rising. Can you highlight some common licensing gotchas with M365 compliance? For example, DLP policies can be leveraged using the E3 licensing, but when using sensitivity labels, in conjunction with the DLP policy, customers are going to need to be aware of some additional licensing obligations. Do you know anything about that specifically?
Yeah, licensing is not my forte. So yeah, one general comment I make is anytime you get into automation, auto apply, any kind of that machine learning automation piece, you're going to have either an advanced compliance add-on or an elevated Microsoft 365 license. But that is not my area of expertise, sure. So I can't answer confidently about that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Where do the because I think you were showing something about the DLP override messages as well briefly. So the question from Andrew Doran here is that where do those override explanations go? Are they useful? They've thought about this for in terms of their limited use of DLP and kind of figured recording the act of overriding was enough. Is there a written explanation around this? It's a slightly overloaded question, but I think it's more around where does those overriding comments go?
You can get at them on the Compliance Center there's a DLP report section, and you can dig in and see the actual reason that an end user put in, and then you can export that if you want. It is completely up to the compliance business teams to own that. Take it on. If you're asking for a reason, a business override, then presumably that's somebody's role, responsibility to take a look at them and follow up with whoever it is that did it. That's the gotcha with that control for sure. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Another question. We just got a couple more. So if you can bear with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there been many organizations bold enough to turn on auto delete policies from your experience?
The only experience I have seen with that is on the Teams chat. Definitely. After 30 days, many of my customers will automatically delete Microsoft Teams chat after 30 days. Yeah. And not the channel conversations, they keep that for 2 years. And everything else, I generally work with regulated companies, so they all have documents and whatnot would all be going through a disposition review before that final deletion. Nothing is ever automatically deleted.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you know if there is a plan to include retention for private channel messages?
Yes, it's on their roadmap. It's not supported right now.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. That's the questions we have. I think we just had one new question. Yeah, it was just a quick reply from Peter earlier on with the licensing side of things.
Okay.
With the P2.
Okay.
No, that's great. I think we've had all the questions. So yeah, once again, thank you for answering those questions, Joanne.
Thank you.
And the brilliant session. And I also want to thank Lesley, Crook, and Stephen Wade from the earlier session on their journey with adoption at Department for Work and Pensions, the UK government department. So really thank you to all our speakers today and also the attendees as well for being here, and hopefully you've taken away a lot. I certainly have, and kind of made a few notes to even probably look at Joanne's and Leslie's slides as well. So, thanks for that. And I've posted some links as well in the Q&A. So, there's links for the videos and slides, and I'll try my best to make them available by Friday, but Joanne's already posted that link, so please do take a look at that. Yeah, I think don't forget to register for next month's event. Okay, so there we are. Great. All right, so I'll probably leave this for a couple of minutes, and then I think we'll kind of reconvene back next month on the 18th of November, and session from Tony Pohl from Austria, Ben Howard from UK here. So Tony will be talking about the journey from Powerapps to governance, the tool set that they've developed to control your Power Platform, basically. And then also you've got the Microsoft project itself, project for the web. So yeah, 2 great sessions coming up next month. And so yeah, if you can, hope to see you online then. Other than that, take care of yourself. Until next time, thanks.